Climate change is already shaping and will continue to shape the future of conflict. Including climate change as part of the peace process is increasingly important. We cannot separate how humans are impacted by the changes we are seeing. There are two broad categories for conflict when looking at climate. First are tensions within states. Second are tensions between states over scarce resources, with private actors often playing a role in both. Climate change is an existential challenge that puts vulnerable populations at increasing risk, often leaving those who least contributed paying the highest price. Climate change is a conflict threat multiplier, with the International Crisis Group finding that a 10 to 20% increase in the risk of armed conflict is associated with every half-degree increase in local temperatures. Climate change can, for example, increase food insecurity, water scarcity and resource competition, disrupt livelihoods and spur migration. These are all key factors that can play a role in shaping and instigating deadly conflicts. The relationship between climate and conflict is not linear. It is complex. In some situations, small variations in climate can contribute to significant increases in violent conflict. In others, it will not. What matters most here is how authorities deal with the problems induced or exacerbated by climate change. How equitably and effectively they allocate and distribute resources. How inclusive and accountable they are. Whether there are good inter-community mediation mechanisms or not. Climate change does not necessarily trigger resource scarcity. In some instances, it does. In others, it does not. Rising temperatures and volatile rainfall mean that many areas have fewer resources, but it also means that some may have more. Greater resources may be a net positive in terms of peace and stability, although it may contribute to increased competition and violence if that competition is poorly regulated by the state. The relationship can also be inverted, with deadly conflict and political instability contributing to climate change, such as illegal logging in the Amazon. Now, the impact of climate change on conflict is context-specific and requires systems thinking. A combination of local knowledge and climate expertise is needed to produce the most effective prevention outcomes. It also needs to be a process that is locally owned and driven by communities themselves.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have you here at the Glocal Voices seminar on climate change and conflict. My name is Amiera Sawas. I'm a feminist researcher and advocate who's been working at the intersections of climate change, gender, security, and violence across academia and NGOs for some time. I've been invited today to moderate this really interesting session on climate change, environmental degradation, and conflict, organised by Forum Civ. So it's great to be here and to play this moderating role. I'm currently working at ActionAid, which works in 45 countries on development, resilience, and humanitarian response. And we prioritise working with the people who are the most marginalised and sort of living on the front lines of climate change and conflict. So that includes, women and girls, who are particularly affected by overlapping systemic crises. So not just climate change, but also gender equality, conflict, and now the COVID pandemic. So we're finding that gender equality issues like gender-based violence, for example, weaken resilience, and that climate and environmental disasters and degradation also worsen issues like violence and gender-based violence. So we realize that we have to start working in a more integrated way, addressing multiple systemic crises at the same time. And this is, particularly important for the issue of climate change and conflict. There's currently an evidence base which is emerging about the linkages between climate change and conflict, which was described in the video that was just shown. And a lot of these kind of impacts, or the work is sort of suggesting that climate and environmental degradation is worsening or multiplying the threat of conflict and fragility in countries globally, but especially those living on the front lines of climate change in the global south. This is a really interesting point of inquiry, and there is a lot of interesting research, but there needs to be more efforts to understand the lived experience of the people in those countries and the work that people are doing to understand and reconcile the linkages between climate change and conflict, and also what, not just what the dynamics are and what the risks are, but also what kinds of development, humanitarian practices and mobilization might be needed to reduce this threat multiplier effect of climate change. So today I'm really, really excited that we're speaking directly to those experts. I'm delighted to introduce an expert panel of people addressing the climate, the environmental crises across various contexts that are also affected by violence and conflict. Their experience will teach us a lot about the issues that are emerging, especially in terms of how climate change and conflict are related to each other and overlap. They'll also share with us insights on how to address this intersection. So I'll just briefly introduce our expert panel. So we have Narith Por from Cambodia, representing an organization called My Village. Narith has been working in community development and natural resources management for 15 years. He's the executive director of My Village, which is a local NGO that works for indigenous communities in the northeast of Cambodia. They work on fishery resources management, forestry resources management, climate adaptation, local governance, and social accountability. And as a result of their efforts, together with authorities, staff, and communities, they've supported indigenous communities to protect over 80,000 hectares of forest land and 71 hectares of fishery resources through community forestry, community protected areas, indigenous land titling, deep pool conservation, excluding community fishery areas. The next expert speaker we have from Mozambique is Ilham. She is a deeply experienced campaigner, activist, and journalist focused on human rights and land rights abuses. She currently works for Justica Ambiental, Friends of the Earth Mozambique, as the coordinator of the Say No to Gas campaign, which is defending people and land against exploitation from the gas industry. She was previously the coordinator for the Southern Africa campaign to dismantle corporate power, and she also works as a freelance journalist, having written for many major publications. Then we have Andres from Colombia, representing Censat Agua Viva. Andres is an environmentalist, organic farmer, and writer. Interestingly, with a background from the oil industry as a qualified petroleum engineer, with significant experience across various organizations, including Ecopetrol, Halliburton, and Weatherford. He's used his deep understanding of extractive engineering and the oil industry to reorient his career towards research on extractivism, on energy and environmental transition at Censat Agua Viva. This is an environmental organization focused on communication, education, research, and mobilization. He's the vice president of the Community Aqueduct of Cascao Village and an opinion columnist for Las Dos Aurelias. He's participated in discussions and processes and publications on the exploitation of unconventional reservoirs, fracking, and post-oil transitions. And finally, we have Prashant from India, representing Srushtidnyan. Prashant is the executive director, and it's an environmental NGO based in Mumbai, India, which aims to address environmental degradation and promote a safe and healthy environment for all. Its mission is to generate awareness across all of society about how critical conservation is for human survival, sustenance, and actually the well-being of all living beings. They put a specific focus on conservation, education, and awareness, and engage with many stakeholders to achieve that, including teachers, youth, women, villagers, educationalists, government agencies, and local, national, and international organizations. They have so many interesting projects that I've been learning about, including a climate youth ambassadors network across Mumbai and Stockholm. Prashant has also written several books which reflect his decades of experience in ecology and conservation. So we have a really amazing panel with so much expertise to learn from today. I'm really excited about it. But before we launch into it, I thought we should just quickly recap why we're here. So this is part of Forum Civ's Glocal Voices seminar series, which were originally set up by regional offices to bring together community-based organisations and experts from around the world to promote dialogue and exchange on shared topics which affect their lives. So we believe that having a platform for exchange is a really good place to start. There's so much to learn from each other, and we don't often get these opportunities to come together and really hear from what is actually happening in different countries across the world. So this is the third seminar that Forum Civ has held. And this time, obviously, we're focusing on climate change, environmental change and conflict. This seminar will cover what it means in realities for communities on the ground and how communities across the world are responding to this ever-growing challenge. So we'll finish up with looking forward to the future and seeing what more needs to be done to move forward. We'll have 3 sections in today's seminar. First, we'll set the scene. What are the dynamics and the interlinkages that are emerging in different contexts? And we'll give some context to the overall topic. Then we'll go into the responses and the outcomes as pursued by our expert panelists and the different stakeholders within their contexts. And finally, we'll move on to where do we go from here? So I'll move swiftly into section 1 on setting the scene. And I will go straight ahead to one of our expert panelists, to Ilham from Justica Ambiental, or Friends of the Earth Mozambique, who's going to speak to us now about one of her areas of work. Thank you, Ilham.
Hi, thanks, Amiera. It's Ilham, but I know when people read it and think it's a Portuguese name, then it immediately goes into Ilham. But hi, yeah, thanks everybody for having me on. It's really interesting topic, and especially in Mozambique, where the gas industry has its presence has become seen, its physical presence, at the same time as there's been a massive insurgency of attacks in the north of the country. So it's a basic background. The gas industry in Mozambique is sort of like the textbook, extractive industry issues that come up, the human rights violations, the forced removals of people, and the Anadarko, the American company which found the gas discovered the gas about 10 years ago, they no longer exist. They were bought by another American company called Occidental Petroleum, who in turn sold the Africa assets to Total. So the company that's leading the project is Total. There are currently 3 projects: the Mozambique LNG project, liquid natural gas, Rovuma LNG, and the Coral LNG. And so Mozambique is headed by Total, Coral is headed by ExxonMobil and Eni, and Rovuma is headed by ExxonMobil. And what we see here is that it's very easy for different companies to not take responsibility for the impacts of the gas industry, because Anadarko, which now Total, being the one who founded the gas, are creating, even though the extraction will be offshore, they're building an onshore park with the onshore facilities, the offices, the refineries, and so they're sort of being thrown under the bus by all the other companies, when actually every company and financier and contractor in this industry is as responsible as Total. So the finances go from the US Export-Import Bank, the UK Export Finance, HSBC, BNP Paribas, all the big banks, and as well as all the big state export credit agencies. And the companies go from Total, like I mentioned, Eni, ExxonMobil, to the Chinese National Petroleum Corporation, Gulp, the Indonesian Gas Corporation, the Bharat Petroleum in India. It's everywhere, right? And it's all the big giants, and it's all the worst culprits. So there've been forced removals of people where land's being grabbed, and the communities who are affected are fishing and farming communities. And what you've got here is fishing communities being moved 10 kilometers from the sea. And this means that their livelihoods are completely destroyed, right? There's nothing. And farming communities as well have gotten much smaller pieces of land than they used to have. And this is where, you know, when you've got an extractive industry, it's not just the mining companies that actually benefit. It's sort of a fair game for auxiliary industries like plastic, private security, agrochemicals. So in this case, where farmers are getting much small pieces of land, Yara, which is a Norwegian company, has been contracted by the government to teach communities how to farm more on less. So it's very complicated. It's a big spider web that's quite difficult to break apart, which is just how extractive industries like it. So the climate impact of this, according to the environmental impact assessment done by Anadarko at the time, it says that the impact of the greenhouse gas emissions from just one of the projects in its construction phase will increase the greenhouse gas emissions of the whole of Mozambique by 10% within 3 years. Okay. And this is even though all of these companies, you know, promise to uphold the Paris Agreement, and which we see all the time, right? But the issue here is, aside from the human rights violations and, you know, the basic the textbook land grabbing, etc. There's been northern Mozambique, if you've been following this, has been in the news a lot for this insurgency that the government's blamed on Al-Shabaab and ISIS, and also because it's quite close to the border of the border of Tanzania. It's quite easy for them to claim that it's very simple, you know, it's a simplified matter of Islamic terrorists trying to gain a foothold in northern Mozambique. But it is a lot more complicated. So a lot of communities that we worked with believe that the conflict is quite closely related to the gas. The conflict has meant that the government, the Mozambican government, could bring in big private and notorious private security companies like the Wagner Group from Russia, who's known for major issues in Yemen and in the Central African Republic and Libya. So they were there. There's now a South African private security company that's there as well. So it's sort of been a haven for mercenaries that have just flocked there as well. And the Exxon and Total have paid the Mozambican government to deploy more soldiers just for them. Now, what you see is, and it's also, people feel like this insurgency, these Islamic terrorists, this attack has just been a bit too convenient for companies. Also, there's only been 2 attacks on any of the companies in the last 3 years since the insurgents actually began, which communities are asking, why is it just us who are being affected and not the industry? So there was one instance where the community of Milamba, which is actually the fishing community that was moved many kilometers away, they were giving Anadarko quite a hard time with the compensation. They didn't want to accept the compensation that Anadarko was offering them to move. And suddenly one day, totally coincidentally, an attack happened nearby to them. And the army, who was supposed to be protecting communities, was nowhere to be seen. The people of Milamba fled to Palma, which is the nearest town, and a few days later, Gabriel Couto, which is a Portuguese contractor, razed the houses to the ground, and that's where they've been building the airport. So it just seems a bit too convenient, you know? But then there's also the fact that there's a lot of unemployment, because so many people have lost their livelihoods, it's a breeding ground for extremism. So the insurgents that are there, it's very easy for them to recruit young people who are angry, who do not have jobs. And the President Nyusi himself said this, you know, he said that unemployment is leading to the is assisting in recruitment of young people. He refuses to acknowledge that a big part of this anger is related to the to the gas industry because people had been promised jobs. The only jobs that have been created so far, menial, are cooks, cleaners, basic construction workers. So people are very angry. Now, what you hear about is the insurgency, the attacks by the insurgency. But what you aren't hearing a lot about is the violence perpetrated by the military. So because the government, the Mozambican government, is freaking out because they all these attacks and they don't have enough soldiers. And now when you've got Exxon and Total paying them to bring in more, to deploy more soldiers, they've been recruiting people, sort of forced conscription of young men. So we know of instances where they've gone to towns and just picked young men off the street and sent them out to Cabo Delgado with a gun. These are young men who have never been trained. They're not getting as much food as they should be. They're hungry, they're angry, they're not really sure how to deal with the situation, right? So we're aware of situations where people have been exploited, extorted by the military. So, for example, if you've received compensation from Total and the military would know that there's somebody with cash, they've been known to take somebody from a family in a community to the bank and force them to give the money over to the soldiers. So there've also been instances we've heard of sexual assault by the military, but because the situation is so, as well as journalists that have disappeared. I mean, there was a journalist that disappeared in April and has not been heard from since. There are activists who have disappeared. Somebody that we worked with disappeared at the end of May and also has not been heard from since. So people are very, very afraid to speak out, which makes it quite difficult to get the stories out there with people's names, and which is always something that the government or the mainstream media would say is that, well, if you don't give us names, we don't know what you're talking about and you can't prove it. So this is another a massive issue that we're dealing with. And can I continue? Do I have time?
I'm so sorry to cut you off. This is all so important. It's so important to being polite, and thank you so much. You have about a minute left, and then we have a video from you as well. Okay. So it'd be great to see that.
So now I suddenly want to say everything in a minute. So we've been working very closely with communities on the ground. We have staff in Cabo Delgado, but again, because of the conflict, it's very difficult for the people to actually resist on the ground in a way that in the sort of the type of on the ground resistance that so many organizations work with and so many communities work with, because it's so delicate and it's so fragile, and it's very clearly the militarization there is as linked to protecting companies as it is to protecting people from attackers. So yeah, I think we can leave it there for now.
Thank you so much. That's just it reflects a lot of dynamics that have been witnessed in other contexts as well, how these kind of corporate, military, paramilitary, gender dynamics are sort of overlapping with each other. So thank you so much. It'll be really interesting for viewers to sort of know where to look to have more information about the work that you're doing in this campaign. So where's the best place for people to look to get that information and to support the work that you're doing?
I think at this point, maybe just sending me an email, because things are changing all the time. The impacts on the ground are changing all the time. Maybe send me an email and then we can chat like that. So I'll put my email in the chat box or in the comments, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Sounds good. And I think we also have a video now, don't we, to sort of illustrate more of what you were saying.
So just for quick context, this video was made, it's visuals from before the community was actually removed. So it can give you an idea of what it looked like before, and just imagine now it's an airport. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Nyingi ni vua mpaka kuja na dalu nepani ngalini kivua na nobobo katambia kama ni isakwati modalini mulawepa moke mukavua upande mwingine nguvu zile kwa nguvuni.
Nós vamos sair aqui ao lado de margem para lá fora quase 15 quilômetros. Como nós vamos conseguirmos trabalhar de lá para aqui? Nós somos pescadores.
Essa mashamba pertence à família desde os meus antepassados. Essa área é importante muito. Até nós aqui todos aqui confiamos nessa área para termos mashamba. Toda a comunidade de Senga, as mashambas deles estão aqui mesmo. Essa área aqui, ele precisa.
Thank you so much, Ilham. That has just been so interesting and also quite heartbreaking of a case, but I think we'll all be keeping our eyes open to it, and we'll bring you back in for some discussion in a bit once we've reflected on the other cases, if that's okay. Thank you. So next we have Narith speaking from Cambodia.
So I'm Narith. I'm from Cambodia. Nowadays, I'm director of my village organization. We are focused on natural resource governance, climate change adaptation, and social accountability. So that is my focus in my organization. So my point is, what I'm sharing is focus on how to empower local community, indigenous community in natural resource governance. And maybe can you share slide here so it doesn't need to. Okay, this what is my presentation. It focuses on indigenous community empowerment in natural resource management. So please go to the next slide. Yes, before going to the next, and I just brief the situation and also the indigenous community context. And in Cambodia, when we see these the people who should depend on the natural resources and agriculture for their livelihood. So when we look at the northeast of Cambodia, this in Srushtidnyan, Kriches, and also Mandalkri, we are working for. So those resources before in natural resources like fishery resources, as these Mekong mainstream dams across there's tributary like Censat, Narith Por, and Sekong rivers, and also as the resources like the forests are important for indigenous community livelihood. So most of those areas, they are indigenous people. They that their livelihood depend on natural resource for their livelihood improvement and also for their cultures. So nowadays, those resources have been those resources have been threatened, like fishery resources along the Mekong River and tributary, because of large infrastructure development. So it really affect to the biodiversity along the stream, and also the rivers, and also those resources impact on the indigenous community livelihood. Another resources like the forest resources. So the indigenous community, they depend on forest resources for their income and also for their livelihood, and those their resources are face challenges like the forests have been cutting, or some land of forests have been sold to others. So because of those actions, so it affected to those resources, and also really impact on the indigenous community context, livelihood. Yeah. So please go to next one. Yeah. So even though we have some intervention to make sure that the resources have been maintained and also protected for the indigenous community livelihood, but recently, because of COVID-19 happening in Cambodia, it's starting from March in 2020 until July. So it mostly happened in Cambodia, and 294 have been found in Cambodia and mostly recovered. But when it happened to what happened to the natural resource governance in Cambodia, especially in indigenous context, actually it really impacts, because after some framework and also policy at national that we plan to be conducted at national level, so have been delayed, and like the fishery law, forest fishery law, or environmental code. And another thing is relevant to any framework and also policy have been relating to natural resources have been delays, and because when the pandemic happened in Cambodia, so there's some instruction from the Ministry of Health not permit for the people gathering. So it mostly we are involved in the COVID-19 prevention. So some activity relating to the natural resource have been interrupted and pending. And we observe that this dropping of the budget for the government. So when we compare 2020 and 2021, so it will drop 50%. So more or less it will affect it to the environmental protection and natural resource governance. And also, as I mentioned before, when the COVID-19 happened in Cambodia, there is some instruction not permit to have gathering other people. So some activity of the CSO mean that non-government organization and also the government actor to support the natural resource governance like forest or fishery also slow, because also pending some during that period from March to July and August. So there's no activity at the field. But yeah, so that is what happened to the community, and we also have some alternative to be a part of natural resource governance. Is we try to use ICT4D, mean that we use the social medias or Telegram or Facebook to help, or another mechanism to help us to be a part of natural resource governance. And also the field activity of the community before, when they patrol around 10 people, but they try to minimize the number of people of the community member and committee to patrol. So we use the local community mechanism to be main part during in that period. And also mostly CSO and also the authority, we mostly during at that time we try to be to push, especially raising awareness on the COVID-19 prevention activity. Yes.
So you've got 1 minute left. Thank you. Oh, you finished?
Yeah. Finished my presentation.
Thank you.
Actually, I would like to add a little bit, actually, because my slide mostly focus on environment because on BI we are experienced. But when we look at the national level, it is really impact on the economic of Cambodia at national, and because of COVID-19, which is one factor, and expected the economic growth in Cambodia will minus 2%. 2% in this year, and also it affected to the mostly ecotourism sectors. Based on the report before it, based on the report in 2020, because of COVID-19, it will lose the revenue from the ecotourism about $3 billion in 2020. So this the impact from the COVID-19, and also in education sector, the school have been closed, and the most impact on the education sector, especially for the student at the rural rural student and poor student. And for the rich student, they have another option to study like online. But when we look at the people at the rural area, they are most impact from the COVID-19 because they cannot use any social any technology to replace or to use for the study, and also impact on the those worker that work in ecotourism sector, because some maybe some people they because of stopping in like restaurant or karaoke or other sector or hotel, so some people they will lose their job. And also government factor, the worker at the government factory also impact from the from COVID-19. Like some people they work in Thailand, so because of COVID-19, 10,000 people worker need to be forced to come back to Cambodia from Thai government, and also the domestic worker that work in government sector in Cambodia, they also suspend their contract because of COVID-19. So it overall impact on the economic in Cambodia. And what I mentioned is focus on indigenous community and environment. And thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really sobering to see the realities in terms of the impacts of COVID-19 on climate action and environmental action more broadly. There was some analysis released yesterday in The Guardian, which looked at how countries are spending or focusing their COVID-19 relief funds. And although they started talking a lot about building back better and building back greener, the analysis shows that actually largely they're not supporting climate action. So this is really worrying. And thank you so much for giving us that context from Cambodia. And hopefully we can talk a bit more about that in the discussion.
Yeah.
So our next participant speaking from India is Prashant. And I believe you have a video to show us. Or will you start by talking a bit about your work and then we can see the video?
Yeah, I would like to speak first and then we can finish with the video.
Brilliant. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so good evening, friends. Thank you, Forum C, for letting me a part of this conversation. And my name is Prashant Shinde, and I work for an environmental organization named Srushtidnyan. It's a part of a network called Future Earth Asia Network, which is supported by Future Earth Sweden. And Srushtidnyan also has got a Swedish friends group called Climate Action. Here I talk about how local community responding to the conflict situations aroused by the state government decides to destroy the forest areas in Mumbai city. Mumbai city is the only example in the world which has got 25% of area under the forested green cover, which is known as Sanjay Gandhi National Park and adjoining RA Colony forest area. Now, Mumbai is always under stress of improving and altering its infrastructural facilities. Currently, Mumbai is under construction of a huge infrastructure project of underground metro railway project. As a part of this project, the state government decided a year ago to build a car shed in the forested area of RA Colony. Now, this area, being surrounded by the urban landscape from all over, RA Colony is still holding a rich biological diversity. It has around 77 species of magnificent birds, 86 species of butterflies, 13 species of amphibians, 46 species of reptiles, 90 species of spiders, as well as we have the leopard mammal, which is a very magnificent wild animal, which also stay in the same forest area. And along with that, we have 27 hamlets, that is where people live in. So 27 hamlets of tribal people who are living there for many, many generations from the time when the Mumbai was formed. So we believe that RA Colony forest is not just a forest, but it is a natural and anthropological monumental heritage of Mumbai city. So this RA Colony was took over by the state government all of a sudden with the bulldozer machines and demolition squad in the middle of the night of October 4, 2019. That is just 1 year ago. And they chopped down more than 2,000 trees in the forest area within a night time. So this kind of situation, when all the Mumbai people got to know, many nature lovers and local people made unhappy. So few of such individuals like us started protesting, and gradually many other people and the organization started joining in the protest. The rallies were organized against these kind of tree felling and destruction of the forest land. The protesters, after a few days, they were detained under criminal offenses. The area was barricaded, so nobody was allowed to enter in that forest area to do any kind of demonstration in forest. The local tribal people got scared of eviction at the same time when they got to know that their area is under destruction of the forest. But when all these small little forest protest and marches and demonstrations were taking place, if not inside the destruction area of the forest, but then all over Mumbai, people at different places started agitation and protest, and that was continued for many days. And various walks of life. It's not just the local people or the nature lovers, but people from different walks of life, including the Bollywood film actors and all those celebrities. They also started joining the protest against destruction of the RA forest area. So this protest was soon joined by the school, which is named as Pradnya Bodhini High School, which is located right at the boundary of this destruction area of the forest, where Srushtidnyan, my organization, is running a project called Climate Ambassadors Mumbai Stockholm. Srushtidnyan has got a very long history of working with this school on taking up various environmental issues and taking small little actions at the local level. This school is also well known to some of our Swedish partners, and they have visited it at various occasions. So this school, the teacher, the principal, and the students, they were very active in discussing the environment issues as they discuss how the destruction of the forest in Are colony forest area was taken place. And it was quite obvious that the school decides to participate in the protest against such kind of destruction. And we have seen hundreds of students coming out of the street, and they were protesting, demonstrating, writing letters to the state government, and holding placards and shouting slogans to save the Are colony forest area. They were quite determined, and they said, whatever destruction has taken place, we will try and restore that kind of destructed area. And therefore, children also got into preparing the saplings of the plant. So they thought whenever this they get the chance, they will go there and plant the new saplings. So these kind of activities that our project participating school children got involved into, and that that took place for many days and months together till the Mumbai witnessed the assembly election. And in the assembly election, the then state government was defeated, and a new government was formed after a few months. And this new government seemed to be very sensitive to the issue, where Mumbai city, the people, the nature lover, and everybody was so unhappy with these kind of activities, and it was reflected in the voting. So it was that kind of response that people expressed towards this forest destruction. So this new government was very sensitive, and they decided to stop the project there. And now very recently they have declared that the metro car shed project area will be shifted to some other area where you don't see such kind of destruction really taking place. So I can see that within a very short period of time, various walks of life, people participating in such kind of protest and winning the situation, and they are forcing the state government to take decision of shifting their destructive plans to somewhere else than the biodiversity rich areas where tribal people are also living peacefully. So I think this is what we think, that it's a happy moment for us to see how people protest can really result into a good result. So I can ask Linnea to now play this video where you can see how our children also got involved in this protest. So over to Linnea for the video.
Born to be the change makers. Everything worries us, makes us think. The plastic devil, Traffic jam and honking, overflowing of garbage bins, roads with potholes or potholes with pathways around. Everything worries us. RA, the lungs of Mumbai, is dying this side. The metro car shed will lead to destruction of 2,702 trees. Oh God! Less green cover, loss of biodiversity, displacement of locals, a people-planet profit loss. We discussed, understood, heard experts, and planned our actions. We had the courage of our convictions. We believed in our cause. Before we could plunge into it, we walked through RA, spoke to residents, and felt the urgency to act. We realized the need. Illegal trafficking is today a concern of all the tribals and locals of RA. We marched through the streets. We made our voices heard. Save RA! Save! Posters, banners, leaflets, slogans. We left no stone unturned. Pen is mightier than sword. That's what we tried to do. Elocution, debate, poems, essays. We reached out by all means. We wanted the entire city to be with us. We reached the promenade, the city hall, our place spoke to us. We reached out to the kids of Mumbai to our brain count. This was the best part of our action, the Chipko movement.
जंगलों के बीच में कुलाड़ा फिर गया, फूल रोया और कहीं का रंग गिर गया.
Trees are our kids and our soulmates. We proved this through our unique Prashant. We want the authorities to hear us. We wrote letters to our CM. We tweeted to our Prime Minister. We went on social media. Our next step, going to Rani Bagh after the final verdict. Today, we may have not succeeded, but we have showed the world the never say die spirit. We are positive and we have already started planting trees. Our mission, be a part of the 25,000 tree plantation. We have realized the importance of green cover. We have started creating a green cover. We at PBHS are sure that our efforts will never go waste. The city will recognize our efforts. So let us all together say, save RA, save RA.
Save RA! Save RA! Save RA!
Over to Mumbai now, where more than 200 school students in Goregaon East have come on the streets to spread awareness and to save the green lung of the city, that's RA, from Metro 3 construction. My colleague Disha Shah walked with the students aged 11 to 14 years who are in support of the Save RA movement. Students have even created banners and posters to spread awareness.
More than 200 students have come on the street to save RA, which is the only green lung in the city. In fact, as you can see, if I can ask my camera person to zoom in, this is the crowd of the students aged 11 to 14 years from Pragnya Bodhini School in Goregaon East, and their only motto is to save RA from all the construction that is going to take place, the Metro 3 construction. In fact, what we also see, there are placards, there are posters, and they have been shouting slogans to let's save the lungs of RA and save Mumbai's last green patch and say no to construction in RA. So let's speak to some of the students here and understand exactly what are they really up here. You're protesting here, you are spreading the awareness by holding placards and posters. Why you want to save RA? What do you think? Why have you come on the streets today?
RA is the only area where we are having greenery in Goregaon and in other regions. So we want our RA to be saved because we want to breathe fresh air, and we don't want metro in RA. Just for our development, we can't break our greenery. We have to save our greenery. And it's very nice.
We are very happy to join the Save RA campaign, and we want to request all that please help us in saving RA.
So here you go. Definitely, we have heard the young voices here who say that it is very important to save the only green lung which is in the city, and only for development that cannot be destroyed. This is Shasha from Iran now.
That's it.
Thank you so much. That's a brilliant video. And again, I think it would be great if we can share that in the comments if it's not there already, so others can have another look when they have some time. So on to our final speaker of the day. We have Andres from Colombia here. And yeah, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Mira. Thank you, all of you, for having us here, for inviting Censat and me to talk a little bit about the reality in Colombia, environmental reality, basically. And we can start saying that the most important richness of Colombia is the ecological megadiversity, ecological, and of course, ecological vulnerability would be the main factor in a country which is really threatened by climate change. Colombia's vulnerability will be physical, economical, and social. And of course, having coasts, the sea being part of territory which is between the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, we will have we are threatened by a rise in the sea levels, reduction, of course, of agricultural yields, and also the proliferation of new vectors and epidemics and damages to housing infrastructure and everything. Probably the last most impactant news about wildlife population were in the last Living Planet report, which said that in Latin America, the situation, especially about population reduction of mammals and wildlife in general, it's in average 94%, and it's due to human activities. And these human activities in Colombia will be related to like our main problems, which are the sources of the domestic conflict and the migration to the big cities, and those are deforestation for land appropriation, will be legal and illegal mining, and fossil fuel extraction based on hydrocarbons and coal extraction. This is in a context of violence, which we need to be very aware of. According to the last report of the conditions in the country, according to Global Witness, they have seen a rise in attacks against land and environmental defenders since 2018. Killing in Colombia in 2019 peaked 64 environmental activists, and according to a local, in the past, a local organization, at least 70 social leaders were killed just this year until the 31st of August. So it's a very complicated reality, which is in the middle of a conflict, in the middle of the grave for resources, for energy, and for materials in the global north. And here our reality in the global south, in Colombia, and it will be the same for Mozambique and from Cambodia and from India. This need for maintaining those living standards in the global north are translating to violence, to degradation of our land, and all this like very complex reality, which is being increased with the present pandemic condition, and in the middle of this COVID-19 condition, pandemic, the country, the government of the country, far right country, with a political party which is in the power, it's aligned on after this after a national emergency decree that gave the cabinet an extraordinary powers to confront the coronavirus pandemic. This social and economic emergency, so-called decree, allows the president to issue decrees and laws if just with the signature of the ministers, and it's been directed to easy in some way the conditions for extraction for extractivism in Colombia, basically mining and hydrocarbons. In the case of the free fracking conditions, which in Colombia we are in the middle of another fight against the oil and gas industry, which is trying to push very hard to release the non-conventional reservoirs in the country, and it's been a fight of almost 4 years, which is in the courts, and is being it is a moratorium of exploitation of non-conventional reservoirs, but the government is pushing in order to develop pilot projects which are called by them, and these pilot projects, which for us in the social organizations, environmental organizations, we see it as a way of trying to do more than scientific or any sort of investigation. They are trying to develop commercial fracking project, and this decree, which was telling before, the social and economic emergency powers in the government have fastened all this process, and in the middle of that is the death threats to activists which are opposing to fracking. That was something which was the last week. We in the Free Fracking Alliance of Colombia, we received threats to 6 of our friends which are working in the middle of the Magdalena River, which is the center of the pilot process, which the government is trying to implement. And I can see that all these conflicts, which are, as I said before, related to deforestation in order to appropriate for lands, more than this, all this cocaine market, which is very often the reason that people in other places of the world see that Colombia is the main problem, is not only this sort of cocaine market and deforestation associated to it, is more deforestation associated to the ways of the land is appropriated by the Colombian elites, and as I said before, deforestation, legal and illegal mining, and hydrocarbon, fossil fuel, coal, as well as oil and gas, are the main sources of conflict, and they are being exacerbated by the coronavirus crisis. And as I said before, as is sort of a common condition for all the global South, the living standards of the global North is putting us in a big risk. Just to remember that the poorest half of the world's population, which is 3.5 billion of people, is responsible for just 10% of carbon emissions, despite being the most threatened by the catastrophic storms, droughts, and other severe weather shocks linked to climate change. And this, I think that's a very, very good summary of our reality. and violence and all these conditions, which are also are our big pandemic, as we can say.
Thank you so much, Andres. You did a very good job of actually summarizing lots of the intersecting issues that have come up across the panel today. So in terms of where we go next in this discussion, let's focus on kind of the next steps for the next 25 minutes, just to make sure there's enough time for everybody on the panel to really speak about, you know, your experiences and ideas for what needs to be done. But just before I go there, I think it will help maybe to just summarize what are coming up as some key themes, because often in the sort of climate, environmental degradation, violence, security space, you know, questions get asked around how does this all interlink? I think you've all done a brilliant job of sort of explaining that, but if I can attempt to summarize, although do forgive me for my weaknesses in doing so. So I think one of the first questions that's really important when we're thinking about these actions and activities that are taking place in different countries, and when they have environmental and climate impacts, you know, they're often being done in the name of development or in the name of security, national security, for example. But one question that's come up in a lot of the work that I've done in the past on this is, who is this security for? So if we take the case of Mozambique, you know, this, developing sort of a security infrastructure around the fossil fuel dependency, is that security for the people of Mozambique, or is that security for the corporation and for, as you just said, Andres, for supporting sort of livelihoods and living standards and expectations of those of us sitting in the global north? So I think there's a big question in the climate, environment, security, conflict space around what is the role of the state here, and who is it defining security for, and who is it defining, you know, what security matters. And clearly what's happening in a lot of contexts is often, you know, the majority of people, those who are going to suffer in the long term or who are suffering now, their human security is being violated by development planning that's sort of going in the wrong direction. Which brings me on to the next question, not just about envisioning who security is for, but it's also about visions of development. So in a lot of the work that I've done in Pakistan, very, very similar trends have emerged around sort of corporate or even international financial institution, or even sometimes INGO ideas around what development needs to happen. And often there's this envisioning that countries will shift. You know, they use models. So, we'll be like the new Dubai of, you know, South Asia, or we'll be, you know, our city will be, you know, will shift from this kind of mega city model into this very sort of sleek corporate style city. And that doesn't work when, you know, that isn't what people need, that isn't what people want. And a lot of that is kind of corporate development, which, you know, is excluding or violating the rights of the majority of people and their needs. So I think that's another question that comes up around the whole climate, security, development planning. Who is this planning for? And if you're, as in the case of Mozambique, but similarly in the case of India, you know, initially, if you're deforesting or if you're increasing GHG emissions by such a drastic amount, that's going to have impacts not only nationally but globally in terms of the climate space. And who are the people that suffer? Well, the people living on the front lines of climate change, predominantly across the global south. And then, of course, predominantly it's working class people, it's minoritized communities, it's women and girls who are going to suffer. Something that doesn't get thought about very much is the urban heat island effect. So there is a lot of research which talks about, you know, as was shown in the initial video, around as temperature goes up in certain cities, you see more levels of violence. Now that's, you know, there are debates around that. But there is quite a solid emerging evidence base that at the very least, kind of living in untenable temperatures across cities has a, you know, severe psychological impacts on people's well-being. And those psychological impacts have gendered impacts as well. So women and men and gender minorities in different contexts experience that kind of climate impact in particular ways, and it's distressing to live in a context where the climate is going above 50 degrees, 40 or 50 degrees, and that is having an impact on existing infrastructural deficits in cities or in rural areas. So yes, the third area is around that local environmental impacts piece. So we need to understand, and we are understanding a lot more today through the discussants around how programs which are sort of set in place under kind of economic visions of development, or as you were saying, Andres, around supporting lifestyles of those of us sitting in the north, are having not just immediate impacts in terms of climate impacts which are affecting people's lives, but that these are going to have dramatic long-term impacts. And if we're seeing that people's livelihoods and their human security is being violated now, that the risks are just absolutely exponential. And this is coming up in the climate science as well. So yeah, I think obviously that's lots of systemic issues, that at a global level, a local level, and there's also policy debates around this. A lot of the policy debates are kind of well-intentioned, but often very much top-down, sort of global north-led. And so it would be really good to hear from you about, what do you see as being, what mechanisms are being applied now in your context to mitigate the conflict dynamics, the conflict environment, climate dynamics in your region or in the specific cases you're talking about. So what are the mechanisms that are being applied and by who? What do you think is working or will work in terms of mitigating these intersections of climate and conflict? And what do you think needs to be done as the next steps? So what should we be hearing as an audience? What should we be supporting you to do? And what kind of, if you want to take it to a policy level, please feel free to go ahead. So I might just, since Andres did a really good job of sort of summarizing all that, and I've sort of stolen some of your thinking here in that summary, do you want to come in first and maybe reflect a little bit on those sort of the next steps?
Okay, yes, I was trying to summarize the like the whole reality in the global south, and because here in Colombia we suffer from this reality. One thing that I think will be in first place is like the way that we have to think on the climate policy. What we see now is almost 30 years of discussions, 30 years of inaction, 30 years of which are the base of our present situation, where COVID-19 is one of the consequences of ecological degradation. And if we discuss about this climate situation, we will have to see that in the first place, we have to move away from fossil fuels, and that's not a point on the climate talks, on all the climate policies. We are not talking about the role of the oil industry in the crisis when we talk about climate solutions, and then they start to make all these reflections about geoengineering and trying to spend more emissions on trying to get rid of those emissions, and that's a complete nonsense. What we have to focus on is on try to leave fossil fuels in the ground. In Colombia, for instance, while our last update of the NDCs is pointing to save 97 million tons of CO2, at the same time, only in the case of fracking, what is expected by the government to exploit is going to be translated to 3,000 million tons of CO2. And when you compare 97 to 3,000, that's in the center of the discussion. NDCs and all these national determined contributions will be nothing for nothing in order to put life in the center, which is what we need, which is what the whole planet needs, and especially us as you said before, in our communities in which with our organizations which are in the front line of climate change. And it of course will be asking and will be questioning the standards of life of the global north, and in the middle of this discussion will be climate justice and how can we face this reality by thinking on equity and justice, and thinking on the way beside these climate discussions we as the society need to act and need to support, and organizations like ours working in order to defend land, in order to defend people in the territories. We are also working for uh, for maintaining the living conditions of the whole planet, because for instance, again on this fracking problem in Colombia, we are trying to stop releasing 3,000 million tons of CO2, which is almost 1% of the carbon budget for 1.5 degrees centigrades. And what we have to what we see as another like a way of facing the future is necessarily leaving the majority of the fossil fuels in the ground and start thinking on making an environmental transition, which is not the transition which is basically proposed by the global north of changing of energy matrix. We are thinking on making a transition to new cultural ways of relate with nature, and that will be, and it needs to be in the center of the discussion. Those are like some points which could be interesting for summarizing this point of thinking on the future from a perspective of the global south, especially in Colombia. I will stop there to leave my colleagues to
Thank you
share
very
their
much.
ideas.
Thank you. Maybe I can bring in Prashant here. I mean, obviously you have done a brilliant, piece of work on mobilizing young people and different stakeholders to challenge deforestation and other environmental degradation in Mumbai. Do you have any thoughts on continuing that sort of work at, at a larger scale, or that sort of work related to climate justice? And what do you need from stakeholders, dialing in today to support the work that you do as well?
Yeah, I think what Anders just now mentioned about equity and justice, that is the most important and prioritized part of the work that we all are doing at various parts of the world, especially global south. But at the same time, I think what as a conservation educationist, I would also like to take a lot of efforts on conservation education, because that is what Srushtidnyan, my organization, is doing for last many years, and that is also resulting in people taking good stands. As we have seen, one of our schools is taking stand against the destruction that was taken place in Mumbai. So it did not happen all of a sudden that the children came on the street. It was the continuous environmental education activities and projects that we were doing with many other schools, and that is resulting into a generation being prepared for understanding the conflicts, analyzing, and then taking action. So that was the manifestation of these kind of efforts that we have experienced in Pradnya Bodhine High School, children coming on the street against the forest destruction. So I think education also make a continuous environmental education also make a good difference to prepare the generation to take right stand. That is what I believe.
Thank you so much. Certainly cannot disagree with that at all. Perhaps I can bring in Ilham now to speak a little bit about what you think are kind of important next steps for the work that you're doing.
So because the campaign is so multi-pronged, the people on the ground are really trying as much as possible to resist, but like I said, it's very delicate and very difficult. We work very closely with them still, but take their stories further. So, for example, a lot of basically all of the companies are in countries that are not. Basically, all of the companies involved are outside of Mozambique. Only 12% of the gas is actually going to go to the Mozambique government to be used there. And I mean, what we advocate for anyway, there's no fossil fuels at all. So definitely no extraction. And for the way that people to access power is by community-led small-scale power production. And so what we're doing is we work very closely with organizations based in the countries where these companies are. So our Friends of the Earth network is very close, and we work very closely together on those. So, for example, Friends of the Earth France will engage with, or sort of have some confrontational engagement with Total, but we'll work with them on creating a letter, for example, to go to take to Total. When we were in France last year, where Friends of the Earth France gave us a proxy to attend the AGM. Same with Milieu Defense, who gave us a proxy to attend the Shell AGM. And where possible, our partners help us with meetings with these companies. When we were in Denmark last year, because pretty much all the Danish pension funds invest in Mozambique, in companies that are in Mozambique, we held meetings with them, explaining to them why they should divest from fossil fuels, one of the reasons being the case in Mozambique. So what really helps is also recognizing that with a European passport, for example, as an activist or a campaigner there, you have quite a lot of power when talking to companies or to your government, more so than somebody from Mozambique might do from a community member, or because they would just listen more. So one thing we've been doing, like I mentioned about the AGMs, is purchasing a share. And as a shareholder, you can go to the annual general meeting, you can ask a question, you can work together to create some kind of disruptive action if need be. Also getting the media involved is really important. So if you know of media, I mean, if you work closely with some media who might be interested, so the issue of for example, the journalist has disappeared. That's not been in any of the media. Or the militarization, and how people have been affected. Neither has that been in the media. So that's always very helpful. Sharing social media. And also something that's really important is that the Mozambican government is very corrupt, right? As we know, like if you look at the secret debt scandal that happened in 2017, where they took $2 billion of illegal loans from VTB Bank and Credit Suisse, and there are now 2 Credit Suisse bankers who are in prison for fraud. It's really important that our governments and the companies involved are reminded that by them continuing to invest in a country that is known to be corrupt, in a government that is known to be corrupt, they are merely continuing this, they are enabling impunity, they're rewarding this corruption when they should be saying we're not engaging with you at all, we're not investing in you, but by they're just continuing this, because corruption is not a one-way street. The Mozambican government does not corrupt itself, so this is also an issue to be raised with companies, and also with our own governments. So yeah, campaigns for so for example, in Denmark, there's a big campaign with the public to get the public to push their pension funds to divest from companies invested in fossil fuels. This is great because it's actually people who wonder what they can do being able to actually have a physical, tangible impact on what, where their money goes, and to get their money to stop investing in an industry that violates human rights. So those are some options.
Thanks very much. Maybe we can bring Narith in now to speak a little bit about, mechanisms being applied in the region that you're working, and what does the future hold, and also how, again, I'm asking as somebody sitting here in the global north, and many of the people dialing in today are, how can we support you to ensure the right outcomes?
Okay, thank you very much. I am Narith. So what should we we have mechanism that we should use, especially to promote or to deal with climate change impact in terms of climate change mitigation and also climate change adaptation. And I think that in Cambodia, actually, these many policies have been developed. So we should work with the authority and also national government to make sure that the law have been enforced and applied fully in natural resource management and also climate change adaptation. And another one is nowadays when we observe that another thing is these some existing mechanism that available in Cambodia. These are at subnational and national. At subnational, actually, there's one like in natural resource governance. There's one committee that is the member is from the department and also provincial administration. So that platform can we can work with those platform to address or to influence on the, especially to address any issue at the community as relating to natural resources. And at national level, actually, there is also existing mechanism that we have used before and also should be applied for next. Like the Ministry of Environment, actually, they organize the national workshop that focus on environmental protection and natural resources. So those mostly attended by policymaker and other stakeholder, CSO and also local community also encouraged to join and allowed to join that. So CSO and also community can use that platform to raise any issue and to influence on policy policy intervention on natural resource governance. And another platform that we available in Cambodia at national level is this one national workshop presided by our Prime Minister. So it actually that platform happened initiative maybe two or 3 years before. So that platform I think it's important because it presided by our Prime Ministers. So any big issue that cannot address at ministry, so we can raise it at in that platform. So that is one mechanism. And for CSO, actually CSO we have our existing mechanism like at provincial this NGO network, so we can work collaboratively and strengthen our capacity to work with the government and influence on the government, and also at national level. Actually, this some alliance at national that all NGO work together to influence to policymaker. So currently, like this indigenous people network, so this River Coalition on Cambodian network, or that led by our Cambodian NGO. Also, we can be a part of active that network to work with the government and influence on policymaker. And for the local community, the capacity for the local community are needed to build more. Actually, MBI previously we supported, we empower community to make sure that they have their full rights to manage their resources at the community, like forest resources management, land registration of indigenous community, and also fishery resources. So that platform are important, and build capacity are important, because when they have capacity, and then they can negotiate or more powerful to influence to policymaker to address that. Diversity income are important, because to adapt to the impact from climate change, so the resilience of the community are important and need to be built at the community, so they can cope with the impact from climate change. And they can have done several, like diversify their income through ecotourism, through provide technical knowledge to them to make sure that they can have produced a higher yield of agricultures. So those are important for the local community. And
Thank
another
you
thing
so much,
is
Narith. I'm so
ICT
sorry, but
can be mainstream in all sectors. Yeah, thank you.
I'm so sorry we've run out of time. But if anybody has any questions that they want to know more about the work that you do, we'll make sure that the organizational link is available for anybody who gets in touch and wants more information. Thank you so much. There's just so many key themes that have emerged through what all the participants have just said. But I think the two that are really standing out, I think, are sort of focusing on locally designed, locally led solutions, and also local transitions, focusing back on human and nature relationships, but also this kind of advocacy piece of work. So I'm taking it as a call to action to me as somebody sitting in the UK and in the North to use my privilege more, to be challenging the power dynamics which are resulting in the situation that we see, particularly, in terms of policy, but also I think it's important for us, I'm hearing this, that we need to use our privilege to profile the work which is being done. There's just such amazing work being done, and we need to profile that, and we need to build awareness, especially when there are people who have been, enforced, disappeared, or attacked, experiencing violence for purely defending the environment. I also just wanted to acknowledge that there have been some really, really interesting comments in the chat, which I think it's worth everyone having a look at. One of them is around, needing to take legal action, holding states and corporations accountable where possible through legal means. And there are some really kind of interesting cases that have emerged around climate litigation, although it's a very new field, but maybe it's something that we need to be, as a community of people concerned with climate justice and climate conflict links, maybe it's something we need to invest more time. I certainly will take steps to do that, to understand. So I want to say a huge, huge thank you to the panelists for just giving so much of your time to us today. And we hope that, if there are any questions from anybody who's dialed in, please do get in touch. We'll make sure that those questions get to you. And, it'd be great to continue this conversation at some point in future. Also just wanted to say thank you so much to Melanie, who works for Forum Civ, and Carlos and Linnea, who've done a really amazing job in organising this panel. So just a big thanks to you. And I think in that case, as we're 6 minutes over time, I'll wrap up, but looking forward to continuing these conversations, and please do reach out if something has really sparked your interest based on the conversation today. Thank you.